What would you do different if you had it to do again? That is the question I want you to sit with, not answer yet. Just sit with it the way you sit with a cup of coffee before it cools, before you've decided what kind of morning it's going to be. The way you sit in a rocking chair in the early morning before the house has woke up and the day has started wanting things from you. Because I will tell you something about that question. Most people, when they hear it, they think about the big things. The wrong man they married, or the right one they let walk. The town they never left, or the one they should have stayed in. The words they said at a funeral that weren't enough, or the ones they said in anger that were too much and couldn't be taken back. And some of that is real. I am not saying it isn't. But what I have come to reckon, here in my 78th year on this earth, is that the deepest regrets don't usually come from the big dramatic things. They come from something quieter than that, something that crept up so slow and so steady you didn't even know it was happening while it was happening. Something that looked the whole time exactly like virtue. I am going to tell you what I mean by that, and I am going to tell you what I did about it, late as it was. But I want you to think about something first, and I want you to actually sit with your answer before you give it to yourself. Do you know who you are, right now, apart from what you do for other people? Don't answer me quick. Quick answers to that question are almost always wrong ones. I will come back to that. I was born in Bishop Hollow in Letcher County, Kentucky, and I have lived here all my 78 years, save for the 2 I spent in Whitesburg after Darrell was born, when Ernest thought we'd try town for a spell. We came back. The Hollow had us. I don't think either one of us was ever surprised by that. I married Ernest Bishop when I was 17 years old, and I did not think one thing about who I was separate from being his wife, because nobody had ever suggested that was a question worth asking. You grew up, you married, you kept house, you raised children, you put up beans in summer and fed people in winter, and that was the shape of a life. That was what a good woman was. I knew it the way I knew Rockcastle Creek would run in spring, the way I knew the apple tree Ernest planted in 1971 would bloom whether or not anyone was standing there to watch it. Granny Lula raised me on one belief above all others. A woman's worth is in what she gives. She said it plain, the way you'd say the sky is blue or the stove is hot. It was not cruelty. I want you to understand that. There is a thing I came to understand about Granny Lula much later in my life, and I will get to it. But for now, I want you to know she said what she said because it had been said to her, in the same hollow, 40 years before, and she had taken it for truth the same way I did. Her apron hung on a nail by the pantry door for years after she died. Blue gingham, faded to almost gray at the shoulder lines from where she'd wiped her hands so many thousands of times. I could not bring myself to move it for the longest. Ernest died in 1991. Mine collapse. He was 47 years old, and we had been married 27 years, and I was 44, and I had 5 children, the youngest of them, Tobias, being 19 at the time. And I will tell you something that I have not been easy about saying out loud. I did not fall apart. I kept cooking. I kept the house. I kept going. And people said, "Ruby Mae Bishop, you are the strongest woman I have ever seen." And I thought they meant it as a compliment, and I took it as one. I did not understand then what I understand now, which is that some of what they were calling strength was just the fact that I had been so long in the business of disappearing into other people's needs that I did not know what grief of my own felt like. I had no shape to fall into. When the ground went out from under me, There was nothing there to fall. I raised the children. I kept going. I helped Mama Bishop when her health broke. 4 years of it, and she died in 2007. And then Tobias's daughter Lila came to me as an infant, her mama not able to care for her, and I raised that child from the time she could fit in the crook of my arm. Lila. She is 23 now and finishing her schooling, and she is the finest thing Tobias ever did. But she left in the fall of 2023 for college, and the house went quiet in a way I had not prepared for. It was January, middle of January 2024, 4:30 in the morning, which is not unusual for me. I have woke before light my whole life, force of habit from the years of getting children to school and Ernest to the mine. But this morning I got up and I made coffee the way I always do, and I set out 2 mugs the way I always do, Ernest's blue enamel one and my own, and I sat down at the table, and I sat there, an hour, 2 hours. The coffee went cold. I did not move to warm it. I sat there 4 hours that morning, and somewhere in the middle of all that quiet, I said something out loud that I had never said before in my life. I said, "Into that kitchen with nobody in it. I don't know who I am if nobody needs me." And the kitchen did not answer me, which was exactly right, because that was not a question that kitchen could answer. Now that is where I want to talk to you about a garden, because I have kept a garden every year of my adult life, and there is something I have been turning over about it ever since that morning. Every year I have planted for feeding, green beans, tomatoes, squash, corn for putting up, peppers, whatever the family needed, whatever I could put away in mason jars for winter, that is what went in the ground. And it is good work. I am not saying it isn't. But here is the question that came to me that cold January morning, sitting with 2 mugs of coffee, neither one of which I could drink. Had I ever once planted something just because I wanted to look at it? Not to feed anyone, not to put up, not to serve at Sunday dinner, just because I wanted to see it come up in spring. I thought about that for a long time, and I could not answer it. That is what I mean when I say the deepest regrets don't come from the big dramatic things. I had not made one dramatic mistake in my life, near as I could tell. I had been faithful and hard-working and present and giving. I had done everything a good woman was supposed to do. And somehow I had arrived at 77 years old not knowing who I was if nobody needed me, not knowing what I would plant if I was only planting for myself. There is a word for what happened to me, and I did not know it then, but I know it now. The word is erasure. Not service, erasure. Service is what you choose. Erasure is what gets chose for you, usually so slowly and so kindly that you never notice the choosing. I had been chosen into nothing, and I had helped every step of the way. I am not the only woman this has happened to. I want you to know that, because I think when we believe we are the only one, we believe it must be something particular about us that is wrong. And it is not that. It is something particular about the world we were handed, and the world we handed on. Let me tell you about Hazel. Hazel was a widow like me, lost her husband young like me. She had 4 sons, and she raised them up in the faith and watched them scatter to the 4 corners. 1 to Lexington, 1 to Knoxville, 1 out to Indiana, and the youngest to the military, and then to parts she never could quite track. And every Sunday for the rest of her life, Hazel cooked Sunday dinner, set the table for however many were home. If none were home, she set it for herself, and left 3 chairs empty and ate that meal she'd spent all morning on without one word of complaint, because that was the shape her life had, and she held to it. She died at 89, 88 I reckon, no, it was 89, with her apron on and a pot of beans on the stove. And people said it was a beautiful way to go, still giving to the end, and maybe it was. But I think about those empty chairs. I think about what Hazel might have wanted on a Sunday, if Sunday hadn't been so long ago swallowed up by what other people needed Sunday to be. I don't know what Hazel wanted. That's the truth of it. I knew her 20 years and I don't know, because she never said. And now she's gone, and that question has no answer anymore. Some things end without resolution, and you have to make your peace with that. Then there was Della. Della had, tucked into her recipe box, the same box she kept her biscuit recipe and her bread and butter pickle recipe, a piece of paper with a route written out on it, a trip to see her sister in Virginia. She had planned that trip 17 times that I knew of. 17 times she had the dates picked, the route mapped, the bag halfway in her mind. And every time something came up, somebody needed something. Next year, she'd say. Next spring, when the roads are better. Next fall, when things settle down. She died at 81, never went. I held her hand in that hospital room, and I did not say a word about Virginia because what was there to say? The recipe box is with her granddaughter in Harlan now, and I reckon that slip of paper is still in it. And then there's Lottie, and Lottie is the one that gives me something to hold to when the others wear me down. Lottie played organ at Rockcastle Baptist for 40 years. 40 years of service, faithful as a clock. But playing organ the way Lottie played it is not the same as singing. And what Lottie wanted, what she had wanted since she was a girl, was to sing. Just to sing, with other people, without being the one in charge of anything. At 70 years old, she joined a small choir down in Whitesburg, not to lead it, not to direct it, just to be in it, one voice among others, singing for the pleasure of the sound. She had 2 years of that, and then her knees went and she couldn't make the drive reliably anymore. 2 years. That's what she got. But she got it. She told me once, she said, "Ruby, those 2 years were the first 2 years in my life I ever did something purely because it was mine to do. Not because somebody needed me to, just mine." And I think about Lottie a lot when I am tempted to say it's too late. 2 years is not nothing. Now, here is the part that is hardest for me to say, and I am going to say it anyway, because I think it is the part that matters most. I taught my daughter Wanda to disappear the same way I did, not on purpose. I would have sworn to you before that January morning that I had raised my girls to be strong. And they are strong. Wanda is a strong woman, but I watched her once I had eyes to see it. And I mean I watched her come over on a Wednesday to bring me supper, which she has done near every Wednesday for years, and I watched the way she moved in my kitchen, the way she fussed over whether I'd eaten, the way she asked about everyone in the family and never once, in an hour and a half, said one word about what she herself needed or wanted. And I knew what I was looking at. I was looking at what I had taught her, not with words, with my life lived in front of her every single day. She learned it from watching me, and I had learned it from Granny Lula. And I want to say something about Granny Lula now, because she deserves better than how I have thought of her in my lowest moments. Granny Lula was not a cold woman. She was a woman who had been handed the same erasure by her own mother in the same hollow 40 years before she handed it to me. A kind of inheritance passed down the female line like the color of eyes or the shape of a jaw. Not malice, just the only way any of us knew to be a woman. I am the first woman in my line that I know of to sit in a cold kitchen at 4:30 in the morning and ask out loud who she was. That is not a brag. It is something between sad and hopeful, and I have not yet decided which way it tips. That is what I mean when I say, that is not a life with no regrets. That is a life where you learned not to notice them. And one of my greatest regrets is that I did not notice soon enough to keep from passing it on. Before I let you go, and Sherry would be after me if I didn't say this part, she would drive over from 2 hollows away and set me straight. I need to tell you something about how this started. After that January morning, I got out a yellow legal pad. Ernest's, actually. He used them for everything, figures, lists, notes to himself. And I started writing down what I had figured out, or was trying to figure out. Not for anybody, for myself, and maybe for Sherry, who had asked me over coffee on the porch in early 2024 what I thought the biggest mistake of my life had been. She is the one who asked the question that got all this started, Sherry Adkins, and I have not forgiven her or thanked her enough for it, depending on the day. She came that Friday, this was maybe 4 pages in, and she read what I had written and she cried. And Sherry Adkins does not cry easy. And she said, "Ruby, you have to put this somewhere people can find it. Women need this." I did not agree with her. I still have days I don't agree with her. But then I heard from Bertie, a woman out of Tennessee, 72 years old, who read what I wrote and called her daughter. They had not spoken 3 years. And they sat on that porch for 4 hours. And I heard from Edna, out of West Virginia, 68 years old, who said she read it and cried for the first time in 11 years, just cried, and felt a little lighter after. And May, out of Ohio, 74, who called her sister after 15 years of silence. 15 years, 1 phone call. She did not tell me how it went, only that she made it. Linda called from Knoxville and told me not to share any more of it, that I was airing out things better kept private. Linda is my oldest, and I love her, and she may be right, and some days I think I ought to take the whole thing down. But not today. Anyway, where was I? Right, I was telling you about the apple tree. The link to what I wrote is in the first comment if you want it. That apple tree Ernest planted in 1971, he planted it, he told me, for the sight of the blossoms in spring. Not for apples, not to feed anybody, just because he wanted to see something bloom. I thought that was a funny reason when he said it. I was 23 years old and practical to my bones, and I thought a tree ought to do something useful. That tree has bloomed every spring for 50-some years. Ernest has been gone 33 of them. And every April I stand there and look at it, and I think about a man who planted a thing just for the looking. Who knew, without anyone having to tell him, that a person was allowed to want beauty for its own sake. 2 years ago, at 76, I planted yellow roses along the south side of the garden. Just roses, not canning roses, not tea roses. Yellow roses, the climbing kind, that will take over a fence if you let them. And Wanda came and looked at them and she said, "Mama, what are you going to do with roses?" And I said, "I am going to look at them." That is where I have arrived, friend. That is what the garden taught me. Plant some things for the people you love. That is good and right, and I am not saying otherwise. But plant something for yourself, too. Plant something just for the sight of it coming up in spring. If you are listening to me tonight, friend, hear me on this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to want something just for the wanting, not because it feeds anybody, not because it makes you useful, just because it is yours. What I wrote down is in the first comment if you want it. I am a late woman, friend. Don't you be one too.